LinkedIn. Welcome to another edition of Elements of Interest. Still trying to crack that SQC code with Josh Burkhalter. How you doing, man?
I'm good. I've been trying to figure it out for 25 years, so maybe we'll all get there at the same time.
So we're not going to get it done today, I hear. Okay, understood. Um, no, that's why we're here, trying to help people on this journey. And specifically today, topic near and dear to my heart ever since I've experienced issues in the space back in 2010 when I first became a lab manager, and I'm having to work with all different parts of the supply chain, and people are using instruments, depending on what company they work for, how much they know about what they're supposed to be doing, all these things always came back to training. And it's been very interesting for me recently as I've kind of been in other spaces, right? Is how pervasive, this training challenge is, as I think it relates a lot to digital, transformation and this move away from, riding in cars with people, like always going to events to get training, having all the money like to be able to spend on that because we're already going to be at all the shows. Now we don't go to all the shows and we don't get the training, like we don't get the technical talks, and how are we replacing that? So uh, excited for the discussion today to talk about the state of training and what people are going through, and maybe some opportunities for teams and management to maybe take a second look and put put their people in a better position to be successful.
Yeah, that's what we're here for.
So where do we even get started with that conversation? What's the state right now, like in your mind? Like, what are you seeing
Yeah,
out there?
yeah. So I think we're probably while the need might be greater than it ever has been in terms of requirements change and evolve maybe more rapidly than they used to. Perhaps that's debatable. Um, we talk about turnover a lot in the industry, whether that's people moving up and into new positions outside of the laboratory, um, changing companies and whatnot. You and I had kind of a recent example of that. Maybe we can touch on that in this talk today. But yeah, so the need's probably much more pervasive. But as far as like resources, I think the resources that are available are probably um, more plentiful than they had been in the past. And I didn't number this list, but I think I have 10, maybe 11 as a bonus. So I'll start here, right? Like, you know, you have what you always had, right? Which is you have staff, right? Typically in a laboratory, there is some level of staff with experience, right? Presumably some amount of experience. Now, often those that are the most experienced or the most capable often are wearing many hats these days. They're doing many jobs, and they are probably at or past their capacity in most cases. So being able to tap into them to get knowledge sharing probably contributes to the deficits that we have right now. So that leads into the term you use, digital transformation. It leads into what are we even doing with this series and the other series of talks that you're doing, and helping be my mentor in this space of creating educational forward helpful contents. So let's start there, right? Like there's maybe an opportunity for everyone in every laboratory that knows something to start trying to capture that. I gave a talk that I probably wasn't prepared for recently at the Houston area chapter of ALMA, which is a group of lab managers and other people in the industry or various industries around Houston, getting together, networking, collaborating, sharing talks, experiences, asking, hey, has anyone else encountered this type of problem, right? It's that type of forum. And I gave a talk about building a tribe on LinkedIn, right? So this is now my fourth week jumping on a video. I'm starting to get a little bit more comfortable, at least enough to say, this is something I'm going to continue to do. Oh, by the way, it's serving a need. And does anybody else want to maybe start to consider how they might help in serving that need? And so one of the things that we discussed during that talk was um, just hitting the record button, right? Whether it's on our phone, and that could just be an audio note, phone on the table, everyone's permission, obviously. Just hit the record button. If there's something that you're looking at, like troubleshooting an instrument or looking at some challenging control charts, well, then let's do video as well, right? We all have access to tools like Zoom and Teams and whatever your preferred platform is. All of those allow recording, most of them, even with the free version. And very often that recording can be a transcript, right? So we talked in this Halma meeting about just hit the record button, and then maybe that can become available, right? Maybe it's this, at least at the beginning, it's going to be this crude library, right? Just make sure it's in a file share somewhere that people can access. It's labeled, right? What is it? What's the topic? Who might be benefiting from it, right? So it's organized and people can find it. But start there, right? We can all do that, right? I have known this for a long time, and I will very often have an engaging conversation through a web-based platform, and I will forget to hit record, right? So I know it's difficult, right? But I think that type of things is available. Well, maybe even before that, right? Thinking about, right, a quality management system, right? There are laboratories where having a quality management system is not a requirement. It's still probably a good idea. Maybe it doesn't have to be up to ISO 17025 standards. There's ISO 9001, which is still becoming quite robust these days. There's ASTM D6792, which is ASTM's version of a quality management system. I actually sit on a committee that discusses revisions that they're making to that. There's a total rewrite. It is going to better align with 9001, but it's different than 9001 in that it's not a very prescriptive, you must do these things, and then someone's going to come behind you and audit and confirm, right? It's a guideline that you can follow. Presumably you can pick and choose the parts that you believe are appropriate to your business. You can make those as simple or as complex and difficult to follow as is needed for your business. So maybe that's somewhere to start.
Yeah.
So a quality management system, right, kind of creates the framework, and within that framework, there should be procedures, practices, guides, and in that, right, when we think about SQC training and elevating the IQ of the laboratory, there should be things in there that start to give people some help. So that would be the first few things I would think of.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And like sometimes, especially from a management perspective, like just this subtle shift, and this is always a challenge that I experienced with QMSs, especially in the audits, and like, it's so easy to refer to these things as something we must do, like to pass audits, and we're required to do this by somebody, so that means we got to do it. Instead of saying like, hey, if we just crush it, like with our customers, which is the like a part of the 9001 like remit, is like you will follow all these things to ensure kind of customer satisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
Like I wonder how many people actually know that, and it's not just to pass audits.
Sure.
If you just crush it and your customers are happy, you're passing audits. Like and that subtle shift, it's like, okay, now I want to know how to do this. I want easier ways to understand how to do it better because our customers are asking these things. And the closer it gets to a QMS, there can be some risk involved if I don't explain it like exactly like it's in the QMS. Like if I just do a quick video, like what am I going to leave out? And then is there like this whole liability situation? That's where it's like this shift of creating safety, right, is one of the first steps to say, hey, like we just need this new person to start understanding these very basic concepts that nobody's gonna like. There's no certification for this thing. There's no
Mhm.
like. We just need to start sharing that knowledge in various ways. So I love that where if you're in it, and like one of the guys I follow on LinkedIn, Marcus Sheridan, author of They Ask You Answer, he's so good at you can very clearly see like he just got done with a talk that he gave and he's in the hall outside of the auditorium or whatever. Starts up his phone. He said, "Somebody just asked this question. This was my response."
Mm,
Like that's all it was. And that
that's
same
cool.
thing can be applied, in the lab when somebody asks like the simplest of questions. Because if they've got the question, most often somebody else does too.
Yeah. I've got it written down in this card right here: common sense and culture. Right. So it ties into that. Right. Um, a lot of what needs to get done is just common sense, and a common sense approach is understanding that people are going to do what they're going to do. Right. Would you like them to do it without any tools? Right. Would you like the process that they follow to be according to whatever rumor they heard about what they should be doing? Um, do we want to allow them to form bad habits? Right. How many times do we complain about things that go wrong? Right. It's common sense that if we write it down and we share it with people and we validate understanding and we give them some tools and some encouragement, like common sense says that most people are going to try to follow like the right thing. They don't want there to be problems. They don't want to get chastised and risk their employment. Like people want to generally do a good job. I know there's exceptions, but um yeah. So this idea about you know it must be formalized, and if it's not formalized, like there's gaps and there's risk. I get it, right? Like there's a million sayings about perfect is the enemy of good, and there's the 80-20 rule and yada yada yada. But you've just got to start, right? And we're talking about SQC today. I mentioned QMS, which is a much bigger topic, um, but maybe it's not a bigger topic, right? It's putting something out there for your folks to understand how to operate in the way that you need them to, so that, like you said, they satisfy the customer, so that you increase profit, so that you comply with federal regulations, et cetera, et cetera. And then culture, because right, and I think we touched on this last week, right? That's one of the biggest challenges, um, at least that I hear about, is it's hard to steer that ship in a different direction. But oftentimes when I hear that and I learn more, I will oftentimes learn that they either don't have a quality management system, or that it's not viewed as a positive tool. It's used as a negative or a necessary evil. And I think there's a correlation, right, between those challenges and the culture around quality.
Yeah, because I think it relates to like accountability. And I was actually just talking this morning, with George about honesty as a part of the culture, like and transparency. And I think that's the number one deterrent, uh, at least from my perspective of being somebody who was asked to come in and digitally transform, organizations. The transparency and the willingness to like put your hand up and say, no, this is the way I do it, uh, in an open forum format, or in a place where you can't control the message like as you're giving it, is uncomfortable, and most cultures aren't built to support that, right? And that's so it's much you're put in a position where the safest thing you can do is point to the QMS,
Hmm.
or the standard, even if that's not the way that you do it.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, right? What it makes me think about is, the QMS is all about continuous improvement, right? All the buzzwords, but it's about there's a problem, great, right? hopefully it didn't end in disaster, but even if it did, you know what? We document, we state the problem very clearly, right? We give ourselves, right, a certain amount of time where we're accountable to understand that problem, root cause. Root cause is about not finding the person to blame, right? But there's a multitude of factors, and we look at all of those factors. Maybe we have multiple causal factors, but we dig and dig and dig until we find the things that are causing the problem. And then we have to put a plan together to start eliminating those causal factors. And then we document that. A lot of times that results in a change in procedure. It's a quality notice. It's a all hands on deck meeting. It's changing an instrument that we use. It's changing a vendor because they're unreliable. It's putting engineering controls in place. It's guardrails, right? It's all meant to help not put people in that bind again. And then those get documented and then verified that they're working, and then we move on, and then it's over, right? And then an auditor comes in every 1 or 2 years and says, hey, wow, your program is effective, right? You found these things and they aren't happening again. And oh, by the way, the people are enjoying their work because they're not, having to reinspect things or retest or, to me, again, it's common sense, right? Like the idea of not doing it feels very uncomfortable to me, right? And it took me a long time to think that way. So I get it.
Well, what was the thought process for you, like before you
Well, I'm going
got
to
to that
blame the
point?
culture I was in, right? So,
It's fair.
it, it, the reality is a lot of it was me being naive, um, and then being susceptible to like whatever that culture was. And it's very convincing to say, hey, this extra thing you have to do that's a pain in your butts, doesn't actually add any value to your day-to-day life. Why would I want to do it? But the more it's not a foreign concept, the more that you can see it in action, preventing problems, right? But like we're interesting creatures, Chris, right? We'll jump on that hamster wheel and we'll just run and run and run and run, and we'll just not get off. And all we have to do is just stop and get off, and we don't, right? I still do it every day, right? I still jump on my same hamster wheel and still fight the same battle sometimes, knowing that there's a different way. That's how we are.
Well, it's the devil, Uh,
Yeah.
it's less uncertain than stepping off the hamster wheel.
Yeah. So I mean, real quick, right? And I wish I could credit the person who I heard this from, but um, to drive this point home, right? A little bit of discomfort, right, usually isn't enough, right? So you really have to be galvanized into a situation that's very, very uncomfortable, or it becomes so painful that you have to change. And that's usually what causes the change. And I'd hate for people to always have to, or another one is like, not everyone has to touch the hot stove to know it's hot, right? Like we can learn from others, like take the wisdom of someone that's got their hands burned off, that stoves are hot, and this is a stove and you don't want to touch it. But we all seem to, as children or as adults, we touch the stove, right? Like um, until we have to change.
Yeah, yeah. Well, until the pain, yeah, makes us change. Switching trigger. Yeah, sometimes people refer to it, and
Switching trigger, yeah.
it is unfortunate um, to see it in the manufacturing space. I think it's fairly well known, and I'm understanding more and more as I like kind of go in and out of the space, like why things are the way they are in terms of reactive versus proactive, and you know, just like process, where there's always a process, whether it's documented or not. There's always a culture, whether it's intentional or not. And you might not be, you might not have the energy to incentivize like good behavior, but that often means you're incentivizing not so good behavior, right? Because bad things don't happen to me, or lots of other reasons, like something bad happened to that person when they tried to do the right thing. So now I don't. I'm not incentivized to do that. Um, and so it's very interesting. But one of the things I've learned is where the knowledge is, right? When I first went to the bigger company, and I was all about they ask you answer, and like, all right, this is how we're gonna make videos. This is how we're gonna turn our website into a 24/7 sales tool with all the information, answering all the questions. I thought that subject matter expertise was going to be the limiting factor because there's only like so much knowledge in the world, and but when you get into these technical spaces, really any space I've seen so far, it's like that is not, there's somebody who knows something. And at the end of the day, you can go as far to say like every human's experiences can be shared in a way where somebody else can learn something, right?
Yeah. Um, yeah, we'll talk about LinkedIn in a moment, right? At the end of the day, LinkedIn's a social media platform, right? But it has a different purpose, right? But I'll, telling myself I spend probably way too much time on regular social medias. So, TikTok or YouTube, and like whether it's a lot of times like travel blogs and, experiences, right? And then there are people that just go live and just other people watch them. And you're like, man, this is very strange. But like also you don't like you just pick up a nugget, just like some life lesson or some experience that you observe, right? There's always an opportunity to like learn and apply. um, and so, and there's, in the technical space you mentioned, right, there's so much knowledge out there, right? And so we need to start creating the bridges, right, so the knowledge can get transferred to the people that need it. So, LinkedIn is another source, right? Whether it be these videos, and then, we'll create content around it. My purpose for 2025 is to publish useful content that's well organized and easy to find so that people can get served when they need it. It's going to take a while, right? These videos are a very early start. There's more to come. Um, so
But
so
like you
yeah,
said, it's getting
LinkedIn,
started.
right? There's so I'll tease it, right? There's conferences, right? Kind of just going down the list. There's conferences. Maybe it's not as common. Not everyone in the laboratory can go, but generally, especially if like you're in the Houston, Texas, Louisiana area, there's the Gulf Coast Conference that's coming up in Galveston in 2 weeks. Actually, it'll be over in 2 weeks, so it's like October 14th, 15th. You can check out Gulf Coast Conference, I think.com, or you can check out the Baytech website. We've got some information there. If you need like a mentor to like, help you get registered and figure it all out, like call me. Um, but yeah, at the conference, right, we'll be doing some talks. You and I have a talk about leveraging LinkedIn, like that platform and its ability to help us in a number of different ways, not just a job board, but right, like actually truly helping. The idea is like, wouldn't it be nice, right, to be able to say, hey, I've got this need, this challenge, right? I'm behind the eight ball, as the saying goes. And then somehow miraculously we get the answer we need and we save the day, right? Like that's possible. Now we can't just not show up and then one day when we have a need, right, ask for the help and expect the universe to give it to us, right? We've got to show up. There's ways that we've got to give back and then grow that network. But I think LinkedIn's maybe an opportunity, maybe not so much with SQC, but like general lab and technology type stuff, I think is perhaps a way underutilized tool I'm starting to learn.
Well, here's
Um,
where I think I want somebody to kind of, and this is where it's very chicken or egg scenario, right? Where we used to, like, even as you mentioned, Gulf Coast Conference, which I'm excited to present with you there in a couple of weeks. Um, that has my understanding, you know, growing up in the space was that it was always a well respected, and it might still be. I just don't want to make too many assumptions. A well respected technical program that you could go and sit in talks and really learn a lot about what you needed to be successful, what new things were happening. That networking, like as we talk about this, and I talk about digital all the time. None of this is a replacement for the in-person training, the in-person networking, right? But the fact is that we don't get to do all that stuff as much as we did before. Um, so, what are we doing in the meantime? What are we doing instead of if we don't go to the event, right? Because that's where there is so much knowledge shared at that event, at ASTM meetings, at a recent Rocky Mountain Reference Materials puts together this great technical meeting um, where it's very, very smart people in a room sharing knowledge that is not going to leave that room. And where it clicked for me big time was when I went into a completely different space, critical power. I'm at this battery conference, and literally people are just scratching their heads. We don't have enough field service people. Uh, and they ask the question in the same way I've seen it done with ASTM. How do we get more people inside of these rooms?
Mm.
And I'm sorry, you're not going to like the answer. You're not. You're not going to get more people inside of the rooms. They're not like that event motion, that knowledge sharing motion is, I'll say, going away for the moment until that recruiting pipeline that used to exist as far as universities and people are actually going to school for this stuff and there's knowledge sharing as you grow up in your career and you make it like people make it very clear like you're going to these events because they're valuable for you and like until we turn that around and bring the value to where they are in the new places, which is social media platforms, not necessarily universities. It is YouTube, right? It is videos, right? Once you kind of re-engage them where they're at, then you might see some attendance and some participation. And that's where like, you know, ASTM specifically, I've talked to them a lot about this. Like they've done a lot to kind of grow the online, you know, availability of resources and courses. Um, but just like in marketing, like as long as it's gated, as long as there's a paywall, no matter how small, like we got to find a bridge between that and where the people are at to make sure they're they're getting these concepts and they just sometimes the exposure is all that it takes to say like, oh, I can learn about this like outside of my QMS.
You can, right? So there's some others on the list, right? So I was really thankful and proud of Baytech during COVID, for example, when the world kind of shut down, and people were largely stuck at home, right? Even technical staff very often weren't going to the office or the laboratory every day. So you have quality managers sat at home, and I'm sure they stayed busy, but we recognized that this might be a golden opportunity. Um, yes, to do some marketing, but to create some content that was useful, right? So we created a series. We partnered with Alex Lau. So he's the chair of CS94 for ASTM quality and statistics. Um, he's a guru. He teaches the ASTM D60-299 SQC course. That's another one on the list. So we partnered with Alex. We've had a relationship for a long time. And Alex did a series of webinars. I think he did 13 or 14 of them. They range from 60 to 100 minutes. They covered really important real world topics. And they were completely free, right? And there was 150, sometimes close to 200 people sitting at home during COVID, consuming world-class content. And then, so those things do happen, whether it's Baytech. I get invites to free webinars, maybe not as much value as those had, because he was the expert. And usually when someone like that is going to spend that much time, it's not free. But we also at Baytech, we recognize. So we've been very successful at selling SQC software in addition to our limbs. And in the course of delivering that software, there's training and manuals and whatnot that goes into how to use the software. Okay, but like when the vendor is delivering the software and making sure that you can use it effectively, and we know the work process behind it and the requirements, there's a lot of dialogue that happens. There's a lot of exchanging of information. There's a lot of opportunity to validate. Okay, well, what were you doing before with your current tool? Okay, would we like to have a conversation about maybe some gaps and some opportunities? So whether it's Baytech or other software providers for SQC or quality management system implementation, right? Your vendor should be able to provide, again, not just training for the tool, but the theory and the principle behind why you're using the tool. So we made that a really big part of our training and onboarding program for our customers. Was it perfect? No. Can you capture everything in the limited amount of time that they've contracted you for? Of course not, right? But we tried to add a little bit of magic along the way. Um, we've really helped some folks. I mean, I can't get into kind of all the particulars, but there were very early on in projects, right? Sometimes even before the actual official go live, there were things that they discovered, learned, changed about the way that they operated that had significant impact on their people and their business. And it's really, really cool, right? When something like that happens, like that's what gets me up to do the job every day. I don't necessarily get excited about software um, or the math or whatever, ISO 17025. Yay. Like it's the people, right? And so it finally clicking and them getting through a hard moments, or like the amount of empathy that you have that they've struggled with a concept or a process for so long, and like you had the answer for them all along, but you just didn't connect with them until
Right.
that right time, right place. So again, why are we creating content, right? Why are we building a network, right? Why is this important? Well, so people don't have to keep touching the hot stove, right?
Yeah.
And so
And
yeah, please go ahead.
knowing that we can't stop everybody from touching the hot stove, but we can stop one or two people,
Yeah.
probably. And if they stop, then people around them might stop, and it's like this networking effect that it's very easy to understand when you go to these shows and these technical meetings, and when you can replicate some of that, right, on these platforms, but it's got to be you. Like, this is where, once I learned that it wasn't the SME, it wasn't the subject matter expertise that was the limiting factor. It was getting that subject matter expertise in the content, right? Because I was the director of marketing. Who am I to be making videos about pharma, you know, QC analysis or development or all the things that our tools supported? I can do that. I'm the marketing guy.
Mhm.
I'm not the PhD. Luckily, I had a veteran that was willing to just go in the lab and just talk about stuff. And the most amazing thing that happened, uh, and this is where people underestimate the power of it, just because it's so unnatural most of the time, and it's very hard to find examples of it working. But when we did a sample prep. Like, sample prep is one of the most commonly known, like, terrible execution spots in material science, and no manufacturer will step up and do something about it. So lots of opportunity for anybody out there thinking about
Mhm.
how they want to have an impact or make some money. Honestly, Sample Prep Academy, hit me up. Uh, we go into the lab, 15 minutes. Just call it. We're just gonna go live. And he just does a sample prep, like one sample, using a microscope, and he's got a screen, and it's not highly produced. Like, the lighting could have been better, right? We're figuring it out. But that first go, like, nobody shows up live, right? That's not why we did it. No promotion, right? But the very next day, because where we did the videos on the website, It's right next to the sample holders that you need to do it,
Mm-hmm.
right? VP of sales says, hey, I'm in the middle of the sale. I just shared this video and they told me they want 3 of these and 3 of these.
Mm.
And they asked if we could sell them the microscope that the apps person was using too. And it's like, we don't even sell the microscope. Well, we should.
Yeah.
Like, and that, like, it was like, oh, this is as seen on TV. We're just showing what people need and they want, like, oh, that's the way I do it. Okay, I just want to do everything you just did. Right. And that's where by sharing the knowledge, it's far and away the number one marketing tool.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Not to mention the training aspect of it. Right.
Yeah. So if we have any experts or people that have any level of knowledge to share, and you're willing to get on camera for 5 minutes or an hour and talk about something that's near and dear to your heart, or that you feel like you have some understanding of, here's the solicitation, because we're going to be doing more videos with more people. It's not just going to be us two. So here's your chance, right? If you got something to share, but also, Chris, if there's anyone um, that works with um, a material, like a manufacturer of like standards and materials, reference materials. I don't know if you know anybody that's in that space, um, but yeah, things like you have a calibration set that you sell. Well, like, how do you do the calibration? How do you evaluate it? Like, how is it good enough? Like, when do you calibrate? Like, these feel like obvious videos that the provider of those things should have, so that when someone finds that, and that's the way that I now operate, that sort of becomes my de facto SOP. Well, of course I'm going to use that vendor. They're the only ones that know how to calibrate the instrument that I'm running, and I'm going to buy their materials. And yeah, maybe next they'll buy the instrument itself from you.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where, like, if you're struggling on where to start, like, we talked about the QMS already. Last week we gave an example of just kind of perusing, tier 3 and 6299. Just kind of reading, you know, uh, definitions of terms. And this is where once you connect the dots, where you're like, there's something where you're like, man, why aren't people getting this already? Like, why are people having trouble with these concepts? Those are the things that you should be talking about. And I know every business in this space that's related to material science has application notes all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And if the first thing you do is just get on camera and read off, the application note, that might be the easiest way to get started. If you're doing it with somebody like me, I get to ask you questions, while you do that. And that's content. And like you said before, and I can definitely, it resonates a lot. Like when you're dealing with these just industry challenges, like it's been a challenge for a while. We all know it's been a challenge. Nobody's figured out how to solve for it. These conversations where it's just hearing it from so many different angles, you will get to the one that viewer hears it in that way and it clicks.
Yep.
And it's a great feeling to see it. So I'll second that invitation of, you know, uh, coming on the show and continuing to share this knowledge. I was also at that event earlier this summer where it's like the first step is asking, like asking yourselves to really do it. Because there are lots of people who are out there that want to share expertise. I mean, come on, have you ever you talk to an engineer, like, and you ask them about the thing that they care about, they're going to share their expertise. Okay. So let's ask them to do it in front of some other people, and watch the magic happen. When, like, I'm fairly confident uh, that once we just raise the level of sharing and from all these different like spaces and all the nuanced ways, I'm already seeing crossover from these episodes we're doing to HubSpot and the
Hmm.
SaaS space, because at the end of the day, it's data. It's data that we got to manage. We need it to be accurate. We need to trust it. We need it to do certain things. Like, so sometimes just seeing that, I had a customer say this yesterday, like seeing how it's done in a different space can now help me understand what's possible in my situation. Right.
Yeah. That's interesting you say that. And I didn't deliberately wear this shirt for any particular reason. It's just like the t-shirt I put on today. So you're not alone. I won't get into the whole meaning behind it. But like, it's a pretty poignant message right now, right? Like you're not alone. Like other people, number one, kind of have gone through it. And there's so many other people that maybe have the answer for you. So let's connect those dots and build those bridges. Um, for the sake of accuracy, I think we always generally want to keep these to 45 minutes or less, but maybe we go a little bit over today. I want to make sure I at least get through this list, right? So I mentioned the ASTM D6299 SQC training course. So Alex Lau, one of the best technical teachers I've seen, at least certainly within this space. He's really the only one. So that's a very extensive course. Baytech, right? Alex teaches it elsewhere, but Baytech offers that in partnership with Alex. So that's both virtual and in person. We offer both of those. It's not to be missed. Now, by day 3 or 4, you're really kind of struggling to keep up, but you get a massive reference guide, and you can always use that in the future. It's a powerful course. We
He's
also
engaging. He's an
yeah,
amazing
he's quite engaging.
instructor too.
Yeah. He will not let you be passive. You will be involved. So maybe that's a little uncomfortable, but it's good for your learning. You also get to use a tool during that course. So when we offer that course, we use the Baytech tool, so you get an insight into how to do it through a software program. Then Alex also helped us record basically that course, but like it's an expanded version, and we've modularized that. And we have that as part of a video library, right? So you on demand. So we package that with what we call an annual membership program. So it's a video library. It's accessible to the entire lab staff. Chapters they can go in. There's a Q&A section at the end of each one of it. You can actually submit questions directly to us through the platform. And then with that mentorship program, we do a monthly quality minute. So some observation or issue that we've been involved in, we get permission to recap that and send that back out to our members, right? So we've gotten great feedback about that. And then we do, like, every 6 weeks, we do office hours, right? So a dozen or so people show up, we exchange ideas, talk about a concept. Someone solved a problem they were having with handling gas standards, way outside the scope of what I knew. But the two people were in the room and they were able to help each other. So, and that really goes back to, like, every time you do have a chance, like, keep your eyes and ears open, whether it be on LinkedIn, the conference. Alex says this all the time, right? The real value comes when you're sitting at the bar after the conference, having a drink, everyone's guards down. You don't have to drink. I actually don't drink. But everyone's guards down and they're more open, and they've, not necessarily thinking about the NDA and and they're just having conversations as people, and they're helping one another.
Yeah.
Like I've got 100 examples of that I can think of.
Bringing the guard down. We need to create a course on that.
Ooh, it's tough.
Some
it's
course
tough.
that doesn't involve alcohol.
Yeah. Yeah. So we package that together with the office hours, and that comes with, like, kind of an on-call. You can call us a couple times when you're struggling with something. Baytech, and we maybe aren't the only one in the space, but the only one that I'm aware of, right? Okay, so let me back up, Chris, right? Why are we doing this, right? Like, we're a software provider, okay? But, like, number one, we care about our customers. We want them to succeed. Their success is our success. It feels good to serve. But really what's happening is, like, we want everyone to be able to confidently use our software to accomplish the purpose of why they bought it. And so what was happening is, right, deliver the software. I talked earlier about, like, the training and development that happens during the course of delivery. They take the $62.99 course, but then problems arise, challenges, right? The real world happens, and they call up and they ask questions that aren't really software questions, right? It's like they need more, right? So this is why we kind of package together this mentorship program to give that ongoing more. And more sometimes looks like calling us up and saying, you know what, I'd like to be able to call you 1 hour a week and talk about a problem chart. Cool. We'll put together a small little custom package for things like that. We've not engaged in this yet, but we are willing to, okay, so fractional employment is this thing now, right? Like buzzword. Yeah, part-time, contract, whatever. But like you have turnover, you promote a lab quality manager, right? You need someone to backfill for some period of time, at least in the space of SQC, right? Reviewing your charts, looking for opportunities. So those types of services are available to help, right? So that's not necessarily training, but it's bridging gaps, right?
Right.
Let's see. You could leave a comment in the video with a topic that you want to learn, and we'll maybe cover it next week. That's another source. You can call me anytime, like literally. My phone number is on my headline on LinkedIn. You literally can call me 24/7. I may not answer 24/7. I do take quite a bit of time to myself, but I will get back to you, and I'll give you a freebie. Right? You're struggling with something. Let's talk about it. If you want some brainstorming, I'll try to share, what little bit of knowledge I do have. If that results in, a business relationship, great. If it results in just two people that have a shared connection and, I can help you in the future, great. And there's people like that, right? There's, so we're going to reach some people through this series that become part of this tribe. So I think there'll be more help out there. We mentioned the Gulf Coast Conference talks, right? So there's going to be several talks. You and I talked about the LinkedIn one. Baytech's going to present for the first time in Spanish, right? So we're going to present
Awesome.
a review of our QC Easy SQC application in Espanol.
That's so good to hear, man.
That's about all I know. So we're trying to reach people.
Talk about an unsupported market. Like, man, I get pretty fired up when talking about the way manufacturers of analytical instruments do or do not support the Latin American market.
Yeah, that's distributors' problem, right?
Yeah. I mean, as soon as we activated chat on our website in 2017, like it was just like, oh man, somebody will listen to us. Will talk to us. That support channel. Like, so I'd love to hear that you guys are stepping up and providing that in Spanish. It's really great to see.
Cool. Yeah, and then I'll host a talk that's kind of an exchange of challenging SQC situations, right? Kind of bring your ideas, and then Alex Lau is going to host a 2-part series about like test method precision and managing bias, I think. And then he's also I think he's scheduled to do bring your ailments to the doctor, right? So like I'm just the nurse practitioner. He's definitely the doctor. So, but yeah, it should be good. And then yeah, there's perhaps some other opportunities, but I think that's the top 10 that I can at least think of today.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things is ask, like, if you're out there and you're struggling with concepts, and it's okay if you don't want to read through the damn QMS. Let me tell you that. It should be okay if you don't want to read through 6299. There are others who have before you that can help you, understand these concepts. But you got to ask. You got to ask for help. It's okay not to understand, especially if you're in a situation where you really need to understand. Like the last thing we want you doing is saying you do, and then bad things happen. Doesn't take too many of those like reenactment videos that you might find on YouTube about plant accidents. Very well done, by the way, but they tell an impactful story of what happens when, like, as much as we don't like them, all these regulations and standards are in place for a reason. um, and it's good to, like, believe it or not, it's good to know what you're doing when you're dealing with volatile materials in volatile environments. So that's the ultimate goal here is putting people in a position to be successful with the knowledge they need when they need it, right? So this has been awesome, man. I love that list. I think it's on point. I really look forward to doing the talk in a couple weeks at Gulf Coast Conference. We will be back next week talking about something of interest. Uh, so until then, have a great weekend, everybody. Thanks so much, Josh.
All right. You bet, Chris. My pleasure.